So welcome to the latest in our series of bite-sized videos, podcasts in which members of our owner managed business group at T&H interview some of our leading clients and contacts and explore what's made them a successful entrepreneur and how to grow a successful business. Today, I'm really pleased to be joined by Mark Cowan. Mark's the former founder of innovation agency Happen, now with Accenture. Mark, thanks for joining us today. To kick us off, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you think makes a successful entrepreneur?
Well, thanks for having me. So a bit of background to me. I have worked for the last 15 years in the field of innovation. So innovation is really about helping people to reimagine the future. And our focus was on developing new products and services for many clients, mostly in the world of food and drink. So things that you might be buying from the likes of Tesco's and Marks and Spencer's, we will have had a hand in working on. Equally, what you might drink from a beer perspective, or the drugs that you might buy from a Boots or a Superdrug. So that was the world that I've been operating in for the last 15 years. And the reason that we started that business, which I guess is linked to the second part of your question, is that normally one of the big drivers of entrepreneurs is frustration. So you're frustrated with the way the world is, you're frustrated with the industry that you operate in. You can see opportunity, but the opportunity isn't being seized upon. And that frustrates you, and it drives you to change what you do and bring people with you and go after that opportunity. So that's the big driver for me. It was the big driver for us. We could see a way of doing business differently, better. We weren't arrogant about it. It was just that we spotted an opportunity and thought, well, why would we not have a go ourselves? And that's been a kind of a big driver for me for the last 15 years and continues to be so.
Excellent. And so you did 15 years with Happen, then came the time to exit, and you're now with Accenture. The timing of exiting is crucially important for extracting value from all that hard work of the last 15 years.
Yeah.
How did you and your team know it was the right time to exit?
Well, first of all, that's a $1 million question, because most people don't really know until it actually happens. And one point to say on that actually is we actually ran the business for 12 years. So I've been doing what I've been doing for probably 15, 16 years. But it was, how do you know, is a really good question. So the first thing that what we did over the course of 12 years, and this, probably a point to make for your viewers, is that there were three of us, there were three founders. So the first thing that we did when we set up the business was establish a set of vows between us, much like you would in a marriage, right? And that was super important. It was super important because you wanted to be aligned in terms of your values and also aligned in terms of your life goals. And what we did over the course of 12 years was renew those vows on 3 or 4 occasions and checked in to see where we were. We were all, when we started the businesses, at different ages. So I was the youngest in the three of us. And over time, you kind of get a sense of actually where's everyone's appetite and energy for doing the business. Now, 12 years is actually quite a long time. It's quite a long time to be married, frankly. I've been married 10 years, but I've not renewed recently anyway. So I think it's important to sense check and continuously sense check, particularly if you're in business with not only with your fellow founders, but also your partner, or if you have a partner, because it is a full-time commitment being in business for yourself. And it's an agreement which you make with yourself, but also with many other actors. And in our case, it was the fellow founders. So what we did was, with about 2 or 3 years ago, we made a decision that actually we should look. We decided we could take the business as far as we could, as we were as a team, and as a team we didn't have the appetite to take it further, and that was fine. It was about having a conversation about what that meant, and then thinking, okay, how might we best realize the value that we've grown over that time. So in a nutshell, it's about being absolutely aligned in terms of your life goals, absolutely aligned in terms of where the strategic direction is of the business, where it's going, and then just being very clear on what you are all looking for when you choose to exit. Those would be some of the building blocks you need to have in place.
It's really interesting, your analogy to marriage. And actually, from the legal point of view, it's basically your shareholders agreement and what you're all talking about all the time from the beginning, and setting out those terms and reviewing them.
Reviewing them, that's so important. So, you know, we oftentimes have board meetings and, you know, leadership meetings and those sorts of things. But, you know, when we started the business, we did something that most people would say was quite unconventional. We spent 4 days with a psychotherapist who basically sat with each of us and sat with us as a team to understand what drove us, how we could come together like a jigsaw, and how we would effectively align and work well together for the next 12 years. That was the most valuable investment we made in ourselves, I'd say, for the whole journey. And kind of, it really stood the test of time, particularly when you're making commitments to each other, that actually you revisit those commitments all the time. And we then passed that on to our team as well. But it was so important for us to appear aligned in front of everybody who worked for us.
It's really, yeah, really interesting. So with all of those sort of pre-planning and vows in place, the time comes to exit the business, and there's inevitably, no matter what, there'll be bumps along the way with those decisions. Did the exit process meet your expectations, bearing in mind the effort put into maintaining things throughout the business? And is there anything you wish you'd known before you started the exit process?
Well, yeah, the short answer is yes. There's loads. I think maybe just some fundamentals, right? So do not underestimate the emotional stress that an exit puts on you, your team, your fellow founders. And when I say the team weren't aware, but certainly on the team from a perspective of, you know, how you are around them, and then your family and everybody else connected to you. That is something you need to mentally prepare for. So, I mean, even some simple things, you know, this is pre-lockdown, but we all made a conscious effort to get well, healthy, fit, because we were going to go into a period where a lot of compromises would be made on our lifestyle, right? So that was a subconscious thing, but actually it was a really important thing. So to be mentally well and to be physically well is really important, and people don't talk about that, right? The second thing is to be absolutely clear on each of your roles in the process, right? So when you come together as a business owners, you're all quite clear on who does what and what you're really good at. When you come in to sell, it's different. And I think you need to really think about that. And we had one person who was the lead person who actually was all over the detail of the deal. And that was not me. My role was to be the voice of the business in that process and to really sing the praises of our business that was happening. And that's fine. And it's been absolutely crystal clear on the barriers around the parameters around that. The other thing to be absolutely clear about is you have a business to run.
Yeah.
So somebody needs to keep the lights on, right? Somebody needs to keep Friday's paycheck coming in and needs to be absolutely focused, because if you're not careful, it will draw all of your focus away from the core business, the business as it is, and that puts value at risk, right? And particularly if you've got multiple parties that are looking to potentially buy you. So it's really important to have a team that keeps the business going, and then one or two that can focus on other things. The other elements that if you told me now, I think you need a really, really top finance person, stroke ops person, who we were really lucky with that. We hired somebody 9 months before, the poor guy, because we hired him and then he walked straight into basically a sale process, right? And he was amazing, a really top guy. And that's so important. And then, of course, the final piece in the puzzle, which you'll know well, are the advisors. And I think advisors, I think we learned some lessons from, I'm not saying that we were, the outcome of the deal is something that we were all happy with, but I think I would think very carefully about how I bring together the advisory group, whether that be legal, corporate finance, whatever it may be. And the big thing that I would say for a client or somebody looking to sell is make sure that they understand you and your business and the outcomes you're looking for. And I know that sounds quite simplistic, but understanding you is important. Understanding the mechanics of your business is important, and then where you're trying to get to. And most people focus on the third point in that, which is, what are you looking for? What are you looking to exit for? They don't focus on the first two.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because one of the things is you see that as the end element that you then line all your advisors up, but actually you need to be talking to them throughout part of the growth of your business, ideally, so that they really do know you and that you've got these people around you for a long period of time, rather than just sort of helicoptering in at the end to say, well, we want you to do the documents and we want you to do this negotiating, because if they don't know you or understand you, it's not going to make it an easy role for anybody. So I agree, not just because I'm sitting on the advisory side, but I do think that that's really fundamental to getting people that properly understand you.
And if I were in your shoes, what I would be doing is actually having away days with clients, even if they've not started the sale process, or even if it's, let's say, 2-3 years on the horizon, just to start. And I use the word, the framing of it as an away day, but basically a freewheeling conversation, which is about where they're at and what they're looking for and what that could potentially, and just to be tuned into that. Because you're absolutely right, the law firm that we work with, which were great, but they parachuted in, we got to know them very quickly, and and then you're into the 1 a.m. sharing pizzas in an office type scenario, which is not the best way of building rapport over time, right? So, which is part of a deal process.
No, totally agree. And I think it does take, those relationships pay dividends because they get to know you. Also, touching on the point of the personal side of the amount of time involved in it. And I think, you did mention about, you've got to keep that business running. Your team cannot know about what these discussions are going on. As soon as people within your employees get wind of this, they get unsettled. So that job of doing the day job alongside handling all these things of going to market and getting the values done and negotiations is incredibly time consuming, and that can have such a sort of personal impact. So again, it's about getting a right team around you to take away the bits that don't need to be your expertise and things. So that's the approach that we definitely trying to take, and encouraging our clients to be thinking about well in advance, I think.
And I would literally, get down to the micro details of time and space. You talk about compartmentalizing, but time and space to think about the conversations they should be having with you, and taking as much, if I was working with a client, I'd be saying, right, let's look at your calendar, let's look at your diary. What stop, start, and continue, right? And how much can we stop? And that's so important to really be and manage that with their clients, if they're a client service-based organization, and just manage that internally and what that looks like. Because I know in the case of ours, my fellow founder who led it, he was largely absent, and that could raise questions, but he had to be, right?
So you went through the process. You exited what was a very successful business. Obviously, from that, and part of going back to why some people do go into the entrepreneur and setting up businesses, there is obviously financial rewards that go with the risks that people take in setting up their own business. What are your thoughts for business owners and what they should think about when they're dealing with what can sometimes be a significant change in their wealth status?
Let me reframe the question, because I don't know so much is about the change in your status, right? Whether that be wealth related or what. It is about a change in status, but I don't think it's the wealth element that, frankly, I thought about. I think it's the emotional connection to what you've been living your life doing that is the biggest change. Your purpose, your role as a leader in a business that you've shaped, you've grown. The term founder goes, former founder, and whatever it may be. It's all of those elements. It's the relationships that you have with your employees. It's how you see yourself in the industry that you work in now. there are so many dimensions that need to be considered, and you can't plan for any of them, but you do need to think about them coming out of a deal. And I had a friend I was talking to who was also recently acquired, and he sort of said, look, I went through a grief process of about 6 months, which is, it's a sense of loss, and it's a sense of, okay, what next, etc., etc. So I think everybody goes through that, and I think that's the thing that you're not necessarily prepared for. So if we go back to the start of our journey with, a psychotherapist in Brighton for 4 days, I'd actually recommend top and tailing that at the back end, just to make sure that you're well set and your family's well set, and everything about who's dear to you is well set, emotionally, as much as anything about life's, the changes that come with selling a business financially.
That's really interesting and great advice. So I think again, leading on, you touched on it, and maybe a positive thing is it does give an opportunity to maybe look at new things or start new things. And what have you learnt along the way that you may take into your next business venture?
Well, the first thing to say is I'm happily employed, so
nothing yet.
I think I think, as an entrepreneur, if you have an intent to do, is to think about doing new ventures or whatever it may be, I think look at your business, or look at it in a sense of chapters. That's a chapter that's closed, right? And there are a great many things that I learned from that chapter, but it's about thinking, okay, what does the next chapter look like, and what do I want to take from an experience perspective into that next chapter? So, using an analogy of detox, what I would recommend anybody to do is do a bit of a detox. It was like, a cleansing. All of the things that you loved about the business that you ran, owned, and sold, list those out, and think about the things that actually got in the way of you loving that business. And then if you do have the intention to do it again, really almost like rearm yourself, right? Bring and focus on the weaknesses that kind of got in the way when you were running that first business. And I think that's something that I've really focused on, and actually working where I work now they've been really good at is literally sort of plugging your gaps. Because when you're an entrepreneur, you don't really have anyone to talk to, really. And what I now can see is actually, okay, I've got these skills. Someone's recognized that these skills are great for us here, but maybe you don't have the skill set here, and that's fine. We'll pair you up with somebody. That is super valuable. So I think that's what I would do next time round.
And it's not human nature to notice or do anything about weaknesses. You concentrate on what you're good at. And that's what gets your attention. It's quite a big thing to sit and think, this is where my weaknesses are, and to identify them, and then put the time and effort into what you need to do with them.
Absolutely. And it comes down to people, and it really does. It's about, you'll have worked with people in your life where you'll have gone, we just gelled, whether it was a client or whether it was a period working on in where you work now or in the past, where you just go, look, we were in sync, it worked, they were good at this, I'm good at that, and everything flowed. I would pay so much attention to that next time round. That's we hired a lot of good people, and the ones that really thrived, and it was probably in the subconscious, were the ones that really gelled in sync with us as a founding team. And it was subconscious, it wasn't design. Right?
Good stuff. So again, another sort of wider comment to maybe round it with, in terms of where we are now in the world, and back to the sort of innovation side of what you do. Do you think that there are any business sectors that are particularly ripe for disruption at the moment, from technology or other things?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So here's the way to think about it, right? So everything evolves, every industry evolves on an S curve, right? Over time. And so think about whatever business you're in, it evolves on an S curve, right? And basically you start like this, and then you get rapid acceleration, and then you get a bit of a plateau. And what happens at the end of an S curve is a load of new entrants come in, and they will offer the services that you offered cheaper, faster, better quality of results guaranteed. Every industry works like that. The past 14, 15 months has just accelerated that across a multitude of industries, absolutely accelerated. So the opportunities, if you're open to the opportunities, are out there. So from an innovation perspective, you can see it in retail, the move to digital. If you think about the retail world, about 6 or 7% of us used to get groceries delivered online. Now we're at 15%. Now, retailers are not making money on that at the moment. So you can see the shift that's happening. If you think about the travel industry, you think about the leisure industry, you think about service industry, they're all going to be accelerated in terms of the change. And for me, that's really exciting. And, from an innovation perspective, it's really exciting. But if you think about the one thing I would say is there is very little you can do to stop it happening. So it's about embracing it and accepting of it. The thing that, when I think about innovation is, and this is a truism for any industry, is people talk about disruption and we need to be disruptive. And one mantra I would give to anybody is, you don't disrupt yourself, you disrupt others, right? So if you are going to innovate and you're looking at the trends and you're looking at the change that's happening, you always protect your core business. And then you think about, well, what's happening outside and how do we respond to it? But you never tamper with Friday's paycheck. And that's a really important factor. So you could say in your industry and lots of other industries, particularly the growth of AI and everything else, you could say, this is happening. What do we need to do? You need to take a step back and say, okay, the revenue we currently get, how do we protect that whilst being ready for the change that's coming?
Yeah. Brilliant advice. I think that kind of brings to the end of our little chat, and it's been really good to hear about your personal journey and that good advice about where you think the world may be heading in various sectors. So thanks for joining the conversation today. For those of you that are watching, feel free to post feedback in comments below, and also rate and subscribe the Travers Business channel. Look out for our next video on this OMB video podcast series. And as always, if you do need any advice or help from your businesses, just get in touch with us at travers.com/OMB or any of us in our team.